It's my privilege to present tonight's Outstanding Conservationist Award. This is not one that we give every year, but we certainly give it to deserving recipients. The criteria for this, again, it's for outstanding, exemplary, and long-term contributions to wild sheep conservation and management, with significant, impactful, measurable, and durable contributions over an extended period of time. This year's recipient is Steve Kilpatrick from DuBois and formerly Jackson Hole, Wyoming. This is just a glimpse of some of Steve's career path. He's a Nebraska kid, moved to Wyoming at a young age, went to work for the Game and Fish Department. I worked with him for almost 30 years. After he retired, he went on to the Teton Science School, the Wyoming Wildlife Federation. And then when I moved from Cody to Bozeman, Steve came in behind me as exec director for the Wyoming chapter of the Wild Sheep Foundation. And some of these organizations at the bottom of the screen are some of the parties that Steve worked with successfully through his career. Steve's focus as a habitat biologist has always been on the foundation for wildlife populations. If you don't have habitat, you will not have wildlife. And he dealt with a spectrum of critters, from waterfowl all the way to big game, elk, mule deer, moose, bighorn sheep. Steve was heavily involved with a lot of national forest planning on domestic sheep grazing allotments and allotment retirements. He helped a lot on those, and we got a lot of them done in Wyoming. Steve also was a tireless advocate for sheep transplants and pathogen surveillance in Wyoming. These 4 national forests in Wyoming account for about 90% of the sheep and sheep habitat in Wyoming. And like I said, Steve was deeply involved in their land use plans across these forests, along with BLM lands throughout Wyoming. Steve was the lead on what was called Don't Poach the Powder, and it was basically an effort to protect crucial big game winter range in the Jackson Hole area on the Bridger-Teton National Forest from motorized recreation in the wintertime. And Steve, very much an avid outdoorsman. You can see, I mean, he climbed mountains, he rode horses, he rafted rivers. Steve was a consummate outdoorsman. Very much involved with the downhill skiing in the Tetons, a lot of backcountry use, and planning efforts to try and mitigate the impacts of that backcountry activity on sheep, because in the Tetons, those bighorns are limited to some pretty small, high alpine, wind-blown, 11,000-foot winter ranges, so they make a tough living. Steve was instrumental in bringing together a group of experts from across the West to help take a really hard look at the Teton bighorn herd in the Targhee Range. So working closely with the Game and Fish Department and all the other collaborators over there, Steve was the energy behind gathering those people. Similarly, at the Whiskey Basin herd above DuBois, working closely again with the U.S. Forest Service, with the Game and Fish Department, with the BLM, with the National Bighorn Sheep Center. Steve was a catalyst to bring all these different parties together to talk about how to improve the situation at Whiskey Basin. For over 33 years now, they've had crap for lamb recruitment and survival. I consider Steve the energy behind the Wyoming chapter's mission update and putting and keeping kids and wild sheep on Wyoming's mountains. Steve was very involved in getting the Butch and Kathy Townsend Youth Award that'll be presented later tonight in gear. It's presented every year here at the Sheep Show. And during Steve's time with Game and Fish, then the Wyoming Wildlife Federation, then the Wyoming chapter of WSF, and now on the board of the National Bighorn Sheep Center in DuBois, Steve championed youth education and outdoor experiences, including the Camp Bighorn, as a great example. Steve's an avid sheep hunter, successfully harvested his own rams a couple different times. He helped others, like Jim Collins. Many of you know Jim. His son Steve and his two grandkids on Steve's son Josh on his hunt. Steve took it one step further and worked with Dan Kura and the Hunting with Heroes program in Wyoming to see that veterans could have the opportunity. Wyoming implemented a program where you could donate your sheep license to a serviceman or woman. And Steve was, again, very involved with that and took out some of those servicemen and women for a successful sheep hunt. I consider Steve one of the most passionate conservationists I've ever known in my almost 50 years of doing this. Steve cannot be here with us in Reno. He's home in Wyoming, battling the biggest health challenge any of us will ever face. Before Christmas, Steve was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, metastasized to his liver. He's undergoing chemo treatment right now through Salt Lake and Jackson Hole, and it's been a real struggle. Those of us who have known and worked with Steve, we ask what we can do to help. And this is a quote from Steve, probably the week before Christmas. He said, "Keep working for wildlife, their habitats, and the kids that will inherit the world we leave them." So I'm asking Katie Cheeseborough, the Exec Director of the Wyoming Chapter Wild Sheep Foundation, and Michaela Clark, the Outdoor Education Outreach Coordinator at the National Bighorn Sheep Center, to come up and accept this award on behalf of Steve Kilpatrick, because Steve cannot be with us tonight. Lastly, this is in recognition of Steve's 45-year career working for wild sheep, other wildlife, and the intact habitats they must have. The Wild Sheep Foundation recognizes and salutes Steve's exceptional, tireless, and lifetime efforts to restore, enhance, and conserve bighorn sheep in Wyoming and throughout their range. Steve's efforts epitomize our purpose to put and keep wild sheep on the mountain. Katie, Michaela.
Good evening. My name is Katie Cheeseborough. I'm the current executive director for the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation, and I'm so sad that Steve can't be here to accept this award on his own behalf. He's a friend to many in this room, but even more importantly, a mentor to many in this room. Steve has clearly had a career filled with conserving wildlife and wild places, but that career has also been marked by his incredible mentorship, whether that was young biologists coming up in the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, or a biologist who got tasked with taking over the executive director position after him. And Steve has mentored me by mentoring my mentors. His legacy continues to live on and on. But even more importantly, he's created lasting conservation legacy by building relationships and forming strong partnerships. And you can see that in all the collaboratives that Steve put forth in Wyoming. Steve's time at as the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation Executive Director furthered our chapter and our mission in so many ways, but the partnerships he created with other chapters, federal and state agencies, and specifically the National Bighorn Sheep Center, has made our chapter have an even greater impact than it did before Steve was there. His passion for educating and sharing what he knows about wildlife and the outdoors with children is really what drives Steve. And what he did to build our partnership with the National Bighorn Sheep Center is something we can cherish and share with youth for years to come. And with that, I'd like Michaela to say a few words. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Michaela Clark and I'm the Outreach Coordinator for the National Bighorn Sheep Center. Closer, okay. I'm honored to be up here accepting this award on behalf of Steve, the National Bighorn Sheep Center. Steve has forever shaped the National Bighorn Sheep Center's role in conservation education of wild sheep by spearheading the many partnerships we hold. With Kilpatrick's leadership, the National Bighorn Sheep Center has progressed to reach nearly 20,000 individuals each year through its museum and countless outreach and education events, such as being here today. Steve Kilpatrick embodies conservation, and the world needs more Kilpatricks. Thank you.